This is how to identify a sugar maple, and this is just a little guy. This sugar maple is quite a bit farther along, at least around 10 years old, I'd say. This specimen is likely as old as the last, just had better access to the sun. I'd estimate this specimen to be around 20 years old, give or take a couple of years. And as you can see, unlike others we'll look at, its crown has had time to develop due to all the ample sunlight it's been able to get. I expect this specimen to be around 30 years old. It hasn't had much access to sunlight like the other we just looked at, and so it's grown up and not out. And finally, we'll be looking at this specimen. Now, it's magnificent. It's simply incredible. The size of this thing, it must be at least 50 to 60 years old. Now for the leaves of the sugar maple. Sugar maple leaves are rather shallowly sinused, I've noticed. They're about a lime green color, where their backs are just a lighter lime green. Nice color. And their lobes are rather distinct, so they're rather soft, as you can see. They're not very pointy or anything or jagged like the silver maple. And it's basically just, Canada's flag. Quite simple. So, I thought it was important that I add this little bit into the video. So, on the right we have a sugar maple leaf, and on the left we have a Norway maple leaf. Now, these are two very different species that grow in usually the same places. And the Norway maple, it's invasive. It's non-native, it crowds out our native species, and it just does a really great job at taking over. So, how do you distinguish these from each other? So, as you can see, sugar maple, its leaves are lighter. Norway maple leaves are darker and larger. These are smaller, you see. And their lobes, they're a lot softer on sugar maple, whereas they're a lot more pointy on Norway maple. Yes, very important to distinguish these two. Even the government of Canada makes that mistake sometimes, which is funny. And apparently this is what a sugar maple's flowers look like in the spring. What sugar maple looks like in the fall. As pictured here, this is an image I took a couple of years ago in this predominantly sugar maple stand of trees. Its leaf colors can range from bright red to orange to yellow. It's just typical fall colors you think of. According to eastern trees, this is sugar maple's native range. This is what a sugar maple samara looks like. Now this one's still quite unripe, and the whole thing will have to turn this shade of brown when it's ready to fall. But yeah, looks like this. Moving on to bark. This specimen's bark is honestly rather dark, which is interesting. Interestingly enough, the bark on this similar specimen to the last is kind of gray, more so than it is black. Yeah, interesting. Less cracked as well. This one's bark is light gray and beginning to crack. This one's bark is well furrowed and is beginning to start the growth of these plates. And the bark of our oldest specimen is honestly a lot different than the ones we looked at so far. It has these massive scales, like these big plates, and it's honestly kind of smooth if you touch it, which is interesting. Yes, very developed, mature bark, very beautiful, very shaggy. That's about it for today, and I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you.